Hey Elliot, to start us off, can you tell us a little bit about yourself as well as your company Spira Inc?
Sure. So my name is Elliot Roth. I am the founder of Spira Inc. And Spira creates replacements for petroleum and animal compounds in the supply chain for food, cosmetics, and textile companies using algae.
And on your LinkedIn title, you wrote DIY astrobiologist. So what does that mean?
I'm glad you asked. So DIY astrobiologist means that I'm interested in organisms that can really thrive and exist in extreme environments, similar in nature to what you would find in space. And eventually, my goal is to go about using some of my experience and expertise in synthetic biology in order to terraform planets.
That's awesome. And going back to Spira Inc., can you walk me through your background story? So like, how did you first come up with your business idea?
Initially, I started my business because I had graduated university and I was left with very little in terms of job prospects. While I was in school, I built a laboratory pretty much out of frustration with academia. I wasn't able to get hands on laboratory experience. So I started tinkering around in a friend's garage. And when I graduated, wasn't much in the way of job prospects or opportunities. So I started consulting. I had a couple of clients that actually never ended up paying me. And so it was either moving to my parents' basement or figure it out. And so I ran out of money and I had sleep for dinner some nights and wound up in my living with my girlfriend at the time. My only cost was food and I wanted to feed myself. So I looked into what is the most nutritionally dense and fastest growing organism on the planet, and that was spirulina. And so I started growing spirulina in aquarium tanks, and that was my main protein intake for a period of 2.5 months. And then I supplemented that with whatever food waste I could find. I wanted to spread the idea of growing algae and basically creating all the food you needed in a tiny amount of space for virtually no money. And so I started selling these kits to friends. I ended up going to a biotech incubator program in Ireland. I got some support from the World Food Program and the National Science Foundation. And then finally, some investment from the former founder of Soylent, which brought me out here to California, where I am now. And so Spira has kind of grown and changed over time. We work with a network of farmers to produce our algae. And then that algae is actually used to replace a blue dye in the food supply. And we're working on getting closer and closer to kind of solving that basic need of nutrition, basic need of like more environmentally friendly ingredients everywhere in the supply chain.
hmm And so I also looked a little bit on your company, and I saw that the blue color and it's called Electric Sky. And in one of your pitches, you said that the color blue happened to be difficult to find in nature. And so I was wondering, did you first notice that problem and then went about, finding that solution, or did you have an idea already and then you happened to find a use case for that idea?
So it kind of was a much more grandiose problem from the beginning. I mean, I had to figure out a way to feed myself, right? And what I discovered was that fresh spirulina, fresh algae, has virtually no taste. And it's only sometime during the processing that it starts having that like fishy oceanic taste and smell that's normally associated with algae and seaweed. And so what I wanted to do was figure out, okay, well, what is the main component of that taste? And taking my background in synthetic biology, I looked into the genetics and I realized a big component of the bad taste and flavor was due to the pigment found in the algae. And so if you take out the color itself, what ends up happening is you're left with something that smells and tastes a whole lot better and can be used as an ingredient, specifically a protein ingredient for plant-based milk and meat. And so the blue color, we extract that out of the algae, and then that's a really great replacement for something that not many people know is most of the colors we use nowadays are petroleum based. And so as a means of shifting away from especially eating petroleum as a food ingredient, we're trying to get every single blue color onto something a lot more sustainable because blue is one of the more rare colors. I mean, you get red from beets, orange from carrots, yellow from turmeric, but there isn't much out there that is naturally blue except for algae.
That's really cool. And what would you say was the most challenging moment for you so far in running your own business?
I think there comes a time in everybody's journey that you are faced with two options, right? You're out of money. You've worked months and months and months on something and it just fell through. And you have a choice. You could either give up or keep on going. And I think at the point when most people give up is when you should actually double down and keep on going. And I remember thinking to myself, I gave myself initially 2 years to start Spira. And I was at that 2 year mark and questioning whether or not I should keep going. And nothing was going right. And I was out of money and it was a struggle. And it was at that point that I really dug in and I said, no, I am working on something that's incredibly valuable, that has the potential of solving real global problems with unsustainable supply chains. And it's really worthwhile to follow through. I think if I wasn't as committed to solving the problem, that wouldn't be the case. And so one of the best lessons that I learned is first solve a problem for yourself, dig in and keep on going, because that perseverance will yield dividends and lead you to success.
Hmm. And so I also saw on your LinkedIn that, at least in your bio, you wrote that you have 6 failed startups. So I was wondering, what keeps you motivated despite all the failures that you encounter?
I had a mentor tell me once that there are 2 reasons why companies fail. Either one, they run out of money, or 2, you end up giving up. And so those previous 6 companies, what I realized is that I wasn't the best person for the job. And I think there is this dichotomy: either you are the very best person for the job, or you have such a desire to become that person that you evolve into that person over time. And so for those previous 6 companies, they ranged from a social app that was supposed to connect people at bars. And I made that when I was 17. Obviously, I was not the right person for the job. I had my fake ID confiscated when I tried to test it out in a bar in like Palo Alto. I created a mushroom materials company, and we just realized that it wasn't the right time. It wasn't the right place. It really wasn't the right kind of opportunity at the moment. I ended up developing a pediatric urological tourniquet, a mobile wheelchair cushion that was dynamic. And a number of these companies, they all ended up failing either through a combination of team, timing, or traction. And so at the core of that, though, you really have to have that foundation of commitment. So my life's purpose, my thesis of work, revolves around solving people's basic needs. And if I'm not going about doing that in some kind of way, if I'm not striving to get to that overarching goal, the final destination, final frontier of developing the tools that eventually enable me to change another planet to make it habitable, aka terraforming it, being that synthetic astrobiologist, then I'm not really adhering to who I am, and it feels false in pursuing those things. So I would say the thing that I learned from the 6 previous failed companies, and any company that I end up helping, first and foremost, you have to have that passion, that purpose, and the commitment. Otherwise, you're not going to be successful.
Mm-hmm. And do you have a role model? And if so, what have you learned from them that you apply to your business?
Yeah, I have tons of role models. So I always recommend that if you're starting a company, to gather around mentors, role models that showcase the kind of steps that you need to take in order to truly be successful, and kind of expand your mind in ways that into opportunities and network and whatnot. I don't know off the top of my head that I have any one specific role model. I do have to say that I'm inspired by many great scientists in history. I think that there's something to be said about pursuing an idea against all odds and truly diving deep on the details associated with that idea. I think in terms of leadership as well, a consistent and steady leadership is really important to be had, especially in today's day and age when things are constantly shifting around you. And so a combination of great scientists and leadership is really what enables me today. And I would say it's a spectrum of a whole bunch of different role models as opposed to one singular person.
Mm-hmm. And do you have any advice for someone like me who's still a student but is interested in entrepreneurship and wants to potentially start a company in the future?
I mean, I could get really like canned and say just start, because that's generally how you end up learning fastest is by starting something that you're interested in, picking a really good problem that you're passionate about. But in essence, that'd probably be advice that you heard before. More so, I would say as a student, suck the marrow out of where you're at, leverage all the freebies and opportunities that you get as a student, because the minute that you're not a student, you lose access to a lot of those things. So like there are student only business plan competitions. So feel free to apply to as many of those as possible. Get as much money and experience under your belt as a student, and definitely don't give a shit about grades. It's really not worth it. Instead, if you are dedicated to starting your own thing and your own business, it's more important to focus on a portfolio of experience and reach out to the people that you want to work with now and work for them. I got offered my dream job immediately after school because I was so interested in 3D printing in space that I designed and developed the project that I was passionate about and then sent it along to the chief engineer of that company. He reached out to me and offered me a job. And I turned that down to actually start Spira. And so what I would say is really pursue your passion, start building those projects now, don't wait, and reach out to the people that you see as role models, as heroes, interview them like this, and potentially start working and doing things for them.
That's awesome. And do you have any book or podcast recommendations?
So the book I'm reading currently, I'm reading a couple of different books. So Principles by Ray Dalio. I'm reading Bird by Bird, which is a book about writing. I'm reading Endurance, which is all about the journey of Ernest Shackleton. And then lastly, the kind of like management philosophy and principles is Getting Things Done. And that's another book that I'm reading right now. The books that I found really pivotal in my life and leadership are Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl and Tribal Leadership, another one that I really found pivotal. So definite recommendation. Oh, to add on to the book recommendations, I'm an avid science fiction reader. I would say Kurt Vonnegut is my favorite author.
And I was also wondering, under coronavirus, how have you and Spira Inc. been affected by it?
In terms of how my company and myself have fared during coronavirus, I've actually found this time exceptionally valuable. So as a company, because Spira works to replace these more harmful ingredients in our food supply primarily, and then we're starting to move into cosmetics and textiles, because cosmetics and textiles are considered like non-essential businesses. What's happened is sales have slowed down in those realms, but sales have picked up immensely in food. And so the team itself actually has grown during this time. We brought on board 6 new sales ambassadors that expand our operations into a variety of new markets. We've reached out to and connected with over 175 new contacts and then secured enough revenue that I think we're about to break even, fingers crossed. So all of that has kind of shown the resiliency of what we do. Our algae production partners that are in developing countries, we've been working with them more and more on securing that supply chain. And so it's shown the resiliency of the supply chain, the resiliency of the team, and kind of how there's a growing demand for natural colors and more healthy food products in general. So business is booming. Personally, I've kind of found time to delve into a lot of personal projects ranging from production of my own alcohol to a fiddling around with a 3D printer and drone, and just kind of getting outside and exploring the wilderness a little bit more.
That's awesome. And before we end, I've also prepared 8 rapid fire questions. So just try to answer them as fast as possible. So the first one, if you could have a superpower, what would it be?
Precognition, I would see into the future.
And what time do you usually wake up every day?
I wake up around 6 o'clock, especially now during the pandemic, it's been easier to do that.
Mhm. Coffee or tea?
Coffee, definitely black.
And if you could have dinner with anyone, who would it be?
Right now, probably Anthony Fauci. I think that would be really interesting.
And what would you do with $1 million?
reinvest in my business.
And if you are to start another company, what industry would it be in?
So during the pandemic, I actually did start another company. It's a coronavirus diagnostics company. And we build mobile laboratories and shipping containers to kind of test people on site for coronavirus. So yeah, that would be the company that it would start to directly confront the pandemic and bring an end to it faster.
Wow. And if you could choose any place to be the headquarter for your company, what would you choose?
Right here where we are, so we're located in San Pedro, California. It's the perfect mix of access to Los Angeles, where we have tons of talent coming from the different universities around the area. We bring in all of our samples into the port of LA, so it's much more cost effective to be here. And it's sunny and beautiful and kind of leaves me open to a lot of my other passions, which include writing and the space industry.
Hmm. And the last one, what's the best advice you've ever received?
Hmm. It's a hard one. So it's actually this stuck with me a little bit, and it's something that I think is really pertinent, especially in the journey of an entrepreneur. And it's on the gravestone of Charles Bukowski, and it's probably about 15-minute drive from my house right now. So Charles Bukowski was a very famous poet who lived around the town that I'm in right now, San Pedro. And he, on his gravestone, has the epitaph, "Don't try." And many people kind of take offense to that, but in essence, the meaning behind that is that if you either are something or you are not, and you either fully commit to something, or if you're just half-assing something, you're not going to be successful in that thing. And he talks about really diving deep into the being of whatever you're striving to do. Like, be the person, be the person that succeeds at the venture that you're going after, be the person that is a writer or a dancer or whatever. It doesn't matter what other people think. If you are that person, then you are that person. They can't take that away from you. So don't even try, just be.
That's awesome. Well, that's it for today's interview. Thank you, Elliot, for taking the time to do this. And I wish you and Spira Inc. the best of luck and stay safe.
Thank you so much, Rick.